We now come during this unusual Holy Week to Good Friday, the day we remember Christ's death, his death on the cross, a death that he undertook for us, for all humankind. The text we will read is from the 15th chapter of Mark, beginning with the 16th verse through the 39th. The soldiers led Jesus away into the palace and called together the whole company of soldiers. They put a purple robe on him and twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head. And they began to call out to him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Again and again they struck him in the head with a staff and spat upon him. Falling on their knees, they paid homage to him, and when they had mocked him, they took off the purple robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him out to crucify him. A certain man from Cyrene, Simon, the father of Alexander and Rufus, was passing through on his way from a far country, and they forced him to carry the cross. They brought him to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. Then they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he refused it. And they crucified him, dividing his clothes. They cast lots to see what each would get. It was the third hour when they crucified him. The written notice of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." They crucified two robbers with him, one on each side, or one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "So you are going to destroy the temple and build it again in 3 days? Come down from the cross and save yourself." In the same way, the chief priests and the teachers of the law mocked him among themselves. They said, "He saved others. He cannot save himself. Let this Christ, this King of Israel, come down from the cross, that we may see and believe." Those who crucified with him also heaped insults on him. At the 6th hour, darkness came over the whole land until the 9th hour. At the 9th hour, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of those standing near heard this, they said, "Listen, he's calling Elijah." One man ran, filled a sponge with wine vinegar, put it on a stick, and offered it to Jesus to drink. "Now leave him alone," he said. "Let's see if Elijah comes to take him down." With a loud cry, Jesus breathed his last. The curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and when the centurion who stood there in front of the cross heard his cry and saw how he died, he said, "Surely this is the Son of God." We live in faith, and an historical faith. Our faith is based on God's acts in history. Creation. Calling Abraham to go to a place that God had prepared for him. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Moses leading the children of Israel out of Egypt. through the wilderness and into the promised land. The birth of Jesus in Bethlehem of Judea, who grew up in Nazareth, who lived a human life, who, having been found in human form, did not think equality with the God was something to be grasped, but emptied himself and became as one of no reputation, taking on the form of a servant. Who taught and preached, healed, fed people, and came to anger the chief priests and scribes, the religious leaders of his day, and finally the Romans themselves, and was crucified. He died that we might live. We remember today with sorrow and gratitude what he did for us. The crucifixion is at the center of our faith. It is the sacrifice that Christ made for us that we cannot make for ourselves. Paul says, I am determined to preach Christ and him crucified. 1 Corinthians 1:22 calls it foolishness to the Greeks, a stumbling block to the Jews. But to those who believe, the power of God unto salvation. In chapter 2, verses 2, he says, I'm determined to preach Christ and him crucified, not with words of human wisdom, but the power of the gospel. Romans 5, Paul tells us that while we were still weak at the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. Rarely, he said, would anyone die, even for a righteous person. Yet for a good person one might dare to die. But while we were still sinners, Christ died for the ungodly. Let us think today, pray today, meditating on the meaning of the cross and expressing our gratitude to the one who loved us and set us free from sin and death. May this be a blessed Holy Week for all of us. Amen.